Okay, hello everyone. We're back in a third video of chapter 5 lecture about leisure and past societies. We're going to begin this video with the sixth historical time, early Polynesia. So that's a geographical area, sort of like around Hawaiian Island, Easter Island, and New Zealand. In that area in the Pacific Ocean, right? Although many Polynesian countries or the regions are now known as a tourism destination. For example, Hawaii, me and my wife, we really want to go there. Now they were sort of like a tourist. Early Polynesians were tourists or voyagers back in the time. They traveled to different areas with a great navigation technique. And once upon a time, this big triangle area called the Polynesian Triangle, Hawaii, New Zealand, and this Easter Island, that big triangle was owned by these early Polynesian peoples. Now, if you look at it on a map, it's bigger than the United States, probably it's bigger than Canada, maybe slightly bigger than China too. It's definitely bigger than Australia. It's a lot of space we're talking about, a lot of movements by them. Now, was it this quote-unquote tourism or voyage? Was it leisurely? Right? Was it for fun? Maybe not necessarily. A lot of time, they moved for the sake of survival and maybe exchanging things, discovering new islands and resources. And that was very practical maybe for them. We don't really know. We don't have a lot of documentation of that, but I would speculate. But at the same time, sometimes something we do serious can be fun moment to moment as well. Sometimes we feel fun in a work, same way. Maybe that was the case too. As I said, there isn't much research done. There isn't much written done about leisure, even today's this Polynesian area. For example, a retired professor from our faculty of Kinesiology, Sports and Recreation called Karen Fox. She was one of the first person who systematically studied leisure's meaning in Hawaiian people recently in a modern time, but there aren't many other documentation. So it's a lot of research to be done in the future on this topic, on this historical time. The same goes with the seventh historical time. Not much written about early Islam and their Islamic area and time. So as you know, Islam is a religion that is centered on Muhammad as God's messenger, Allah's prophet. And it's the second largest population, second largest religion in terms of population in the world right now. And as one of the Muhammad's sayings and quotes go, recreate your hearts hour by hour, hour after hour, for the tired hearts go blind. So really talks about the importance of recovering and recuperating your mind and your emotion in a way, psychological well-being and spiritual well-being for well-being as well as for goodness, basically. So I can see a lot of basically relaxation and relaxing leisure in this quote. And that's the kind of leisure, that's the meaning of leisure that they had and that they cherished back in the time. And probably still they do in this geographical area. And this relaxing leisure includes such as friendly conversation, having a nice conversation, having fountains in your home if you're rich maybe. By the way, this Middle Eastern, Belgian, this area right now has fantastic architectural culture. The palace, their gardens, they have dorm sort of thing, and it's fantastic because they're very good at the geometry. Musical entertainment, and maybe chess and other games. I think these are the people who I think created one of the most famous games called backgammon, probably, I think. I could be wrong about this. Anyway, relaxation was important to them. And obviously, it's still important to us. as well, right? Relaxation. We do a lot of things, watching TV, still having a nice conversation. Now I'm taking this video in August, so it's really hot here, so I would like to chill out right next to a body of water, maybe fountain as well, and playing games. Another important leisure-related thing in Islam, was what is called harem. Okay, it's a domestic space, so it's a space in a house to seclude or separate a wife or wives, depending on the time and the region we're talking about, of rich family, rich man, to maintain, quote unquote, the modesty, privilege, and protection of woman. So it's very gendered nature. Okay, like ancient Greek and ancient Rome too, a lot of things were still heavily gendered, and sometimes society are patriarchal, and the leisure was something that's, you know, related to that too. In this case though, leisure wasn't necessarily prohibited for, you know, women in a way. I mean, they had a restriction of freedom, apparently, right? They had to be in this space, harem, but at the same time they had an entertainment space, relaxing thing, unique to them, woman. So that's very interesting, but that was very gendered. And as you see later in this chapter, in this course, sorry, today's even leisure, sports, recreation, tourism still is influenced by gender. It's not necessarily equal and equitable between different gender groups as well. So there's that contemporary connection as well. We skip the 8th one and we go to 9, which is medieval Europe. I think this is also highlighted in red. It's very important, must know, right? One of the key background of the medieval Europe is feudalism. And what do we mean by that is basically hierarchical social system. It's a pyramid-like thing in this picture, in which individuals in the upper class protected those in a lower class in exchange for their labor and sometimes military service, depending on who the, you know, lower class people are. Are they, you know, lords and they're noble people, the knights, or are they, for example, peasants, right? Very vertical society. Now, one of the first leisure scholars, and also he's considered to be one of the fathers of sociology, is Tolstoy Veverin, this guy in the book cover page. And he's famous because he wrote the book called The Theory of the Leisure Class. So he's considered to be one of the first leisure researcher. And he did some historical and also contemporary study back in the time. And he realized, especially in medieval Europe and still in Europe, there were some people with the resources, like lords, with the money and their land and other things. They did this events gathering. They hosted this, you know, event where guests come to your place, and they'll eat and drink a lot of things and enjoy those, you know, lords, the host. They would provide some entertainment, such as music, performance, games, theater to them. And the veteran goes, why would they do that, right? If you think about it. In terms of economics, which was, you know, one of the mainstream perspective back then, doesn't make sense, because those lords are using their money and they're decreasing their power in a way because they're using the money. They're not getting anything in exchange, economically speaking, right? I mean, physically and psychologically, they're not, I mean, those funds are had by those guests, not by the lord. I mean, so it didn't really make sense, again, to Beverin. And he goes like, why? And he created this concept called conspicuous leisure. And conspicuous here means showing off, basically. And that he thought that was it. That explains why those lords did it. It was more about social, symbolic, and cultural capital. And by that, for example, if those hosts can have, very famous, powerful people as a guest invited to their place, that means that speaks to their social power, social networks, the connections that they have, right? And also, beyond the stuff that they're providing, maybe expensive drink, expensive food and performance, yes, that shows off the economic power, but also depending on the thing that they're providing, it also talk about cultural capital, as in the taste, quote unquote, taste that you have, not just the expensive drink, but also rare drink, for example, from only available from certain period, or maybe that everything is nicely themed, drink and food and performance was kind of cohesive in a way that it's really tasteful, maybe that it speaks to how sophisticated this and culturally educated this host are. So the people who attended it, people who observed that extravaganza, the event, big event, realize, hey, this person has a lot of social connections, a lot of social power, a lot of cultural capital. They know what's good, so they respect and experience. So there's symbolic power involved in that too. Now the question is, do we do it now? I'll leave it to that. Conspicuous leisure, showing off leisure. Do we do it? Maybe we do. This is a good kind of question that I could ask in maybe quiz and exam potentially. And so that we're talking about upper class leisure now, back in the time in the medieval Europe. What about lower class? Well, not just lower, but knights and middle to maybe potentially lower. Their leisure practices tend to focus on sharpening their skills and strategy to protect the land, especially knights, I guess. Hunting, things like hunting, sports context, type of things. Very different, very class segregated. Another important background of this medieval Europe is this movement called European Reformation. It's a movement to reform or correct Roman Catholic Church system that promoted back in the time, so 15th to 16th century, the sale or sales of indulgence. What indulgence is a piece of paper. So basically, church people go, oh, you think that you did something wrong, you feel like you have a sin. No worries, you buy this piece of paper, money goes to our church, and you're good to go to heaven, basically. And obviously you go like, that doesn't sound like the maybe religion that you know. And that's exactly what some of the people, the reformers, people like Martin Luther, John Calvin, for example, in Europe back in the time, felt that's not the way it should be. And it eventually leads to Protestantism, another type of Christianity in a way. What's important is that this Protestantism came with a strong work ethic. In it, hard work was considered to be a way to pray, actually pray for God and to be salvaged in afterlife. There's a word called calling, right? Calling, and that's sort of like a God-given career and vocation. And that's this time, idea around this time, basically. Before that, work was, not part of their belief system, and spending too much time on work and not doing something related to religion and church was considered to be, it's religiously not good, actually. But that's flipped in this time. It's good to work hard. And also work ethic created a culture that is against hedonistic or hedonic pursuits, such as, for example, holidays, free time. That was reduced from about 200 to 79. That's a huge drop. 79 is still a lot compared to us, right? But still, that's a big drop. Rather than that, work was encouraged. So this clearly has a major impact on leisure and the leisure's meaning that they had back in the time. They have less free time. And the mentality is also different. Now they have to work hard. The work is good, right? So there's a major shift from leisurely life to the work-based life. And that's related to this Reformation and Protestant work ethic. And finally, we're in a last, and it's very important, historical time called the Industrial Revolution. It happened in, I guess, what, 18th to 19th century, from Europe to North America, mostly as a beginning. That's our Industrial Revolution. Is a complex, radical socioeconomic changes, a way of us making money and capital and resource changed, and our society changed. From extensive mechanization of production to make stuff, we started to use a machine, and that was a huge deal in terms of it changed our life, it changed our leisure. Now, how, right? One way is this structured work time in urban factory. So now instead of going to the field and doing agriculture in the countryside, people come to their cities and work at the factory. Now, it's not seasonal and it's not influenced by weather anymore. It doesn't matter if it's a rainy day or it's a sunny day, you go to factory and work from maybe 6 a.m. to like 4 p.m., right? A long time. And that creates a clear divide between work time and leisure. There's a space also division too. The factory is a workspace. Back in the time in the countryside, a home, the field, I mean, the work leisure space was kind of like mixed, right? And even in a field, you may have some fun, right? Maybe hayride, I don't know, but maybe there's something you can do outdoorsy for fun, leisurely, even during work time as well, if you're doing agricultural work. But that wasn't the case because of this structured work and industrial revolution. Another thing, another consequence was this specialized, monotonous work. What do we mean by that? Back in the time, you would make, let's say, a chair, then you make the entire chair, right, as a person. And you see from the beginning to the end, you do different kinds of things, bending and, kind of tying together, maybe you're carving something, maybe you do different kind of stuff, and you see the finished product. It's satisfying in a way. It's work, but it's satisfying. And now, after Industrial Revolution, you do one thing. For example, you make, I don't know, the back of the chair, right, this part, and you make that part only. And just do that every time, all the time. You never see the entire chair. It's not maybe probably as satisfying as the previous type of work, right? So it's boring, to be honest. After, if you're making thousands of this back of the chair, it gets really boring and not a lot of a sense of accomplishment and satisfaction maybe. And you get tired and you really need leisure for the sake of recovery, like very psychologically and also physically from work. And that was because of this monotonous type of work. If you want to know what this specialized monotonous work, you can watch this Charlie Chaplin, one of the greatest comedian, I think, in human history, and his masterpiece called Modern Times. I think I can show you a picture of it. And here's a YouTube video about the scene. And basically, Charlie Chaplin is the left side, a guy, and he's a factory worker, and he goes nuts, basically, by doing this simple work of tightening bolt, I guess. Just keep doing this every time and hundreds of times per day. And this Modern Time criticizes, basically, how dehumanizing that work is. And you can only imagine what kind of leisure you have to have. Maybe relaxing stuff, right? Or maybe something creative that you don't have at the work. Another consequence of Industrial Revolution is that you had a lot of people coming from countryside to the city area. And there's overcrowding in there, poor sanitation. There's a lot of problems. There are many people on the street, for example, and their leisure and recreation were used as a problem-solving solutions. One of the ways the leisure and recreation was used was through settlement houses. And that institution in an inner city, big city, inside where factories are located at, providing various community services, including childcare, for example, because parents are now both working at factories. They don't have a grandparents in a countryside who can take care of them, right? So you have to provide childcare during daytime. After the factory work hours, they would provide adult education because sometimes people from countryside, they don't know how to read and write, right? And then discuss about politics and learn about politics and voting and voting system. Well, and also sort of like, how, good citizenship, basically, back in the time. So these were the issues that they faced. So they used leisure recreation settlement house as a way to solve this. They provided, for example, cafe time to do this adult education. One of the most famous settlement houses in North America, in the world, is called Hull House in Chicago. And you can see a bit of history in your textbook. If you're in a social work major, you must know Hull House and settlement houses. Playground movement was also very similar problem-solving situation. They basically, again, parents were going to the factory, so they needed some sort of childcare, which was done by sand garden, which is basically a sandbox kind of thing. And there's a lot of, people who are taking care of the factory workers' children. And this is the one from Boston in the United States. This is also the time when we created a Boy Scout and what's called a Girl Guides back in the time, and now it's called a Girl Scout as well. So this is also about educating kids, and actually rather than letting them just wandering in a community, let them do something good for community, right? Volunteering, those things. So that was also a creative way and actually a logical way to use leisure recreation to solve the problem that they were facing, the communities and society was facing. So this time of leisure and recreation is considered to be what is called rational recreation, rational as in reason, right? So leisure recreation back in the time wasn't necessary for, having fun and for, what you want. But it's about, okay, here's a problem that we're facing. How can we use the leisure to solve that? It's very, very logical, rational. Does that make sense? It's a very unique type of recreation. Do we still do it? I think so. I mean, we still have Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts, for example. We have still kindergarten, nursery school, those things. Do we have something similar to settlement house? We have a community recreation center, maybe. And this is also the time when we had this leisure movement, where we had where we created our therapeutic recreation, which uses recreation for people with disability, especially at the beginning, people with the psychological mental health issues. And expansion of national park system down in the States as well, Canada, right? But again, of course, we have to think about whose lands were taken back then. It was for the conservation of nature and also used for recreation purposes, but those were also oftentimes sacred places for indigenous population peoples. And finally, organized camping association as well. So a lot of leisure stuff made back in the time. So this is the end of chapter 5. And a few takeaway and things you want to make sure you achieved is this. First, leisure's meanings have changed over time across places. There are different specific things. You got to understand some of them, definitely. The red one for sure. But most importantly, the meanings changed over time. If we want to change it now, the problematic meanings of leisure we have now, we could do that. Can you identify similarities between leisure's meaning in the past and those of today's society? Right? I could ask that. And that's what we want. That's why we want to learn about history, right? We want to learn about today now by learning about the past. And make sure you understand those meanings, leisure meanings in 4 historical times in red, for sure. Ancient Greece, ancient Rome, medieval Europe, and Industrial Revolution. But also choose at least 3 non-red historical times and study them well. You have this video, you have the textbook. You can also do your own, extra work as well on that too. But that's your choice. That's your journey. Choose what interests you. So this is the end of chapter 3. Bye now.